Because even in saying everything that the world has to offer, it's nothing compared to what Jesus wants to give to us. It's nothing compared to what Jesus has provided already for us. This morning I want to take some time and ask you a few questions, all related to one another. But I want to ask you the questions: how much did your salvation cost you? How much is your salvation worth to you? And what is the value of salvation? Before we can truthfully answer any of these questions, we've got to define what these terms actually mean so that we can make sure we're all on the same understanding. We all have the same description and we know how to answer these questions properly. So the three different terms that we're dealing with this morning is cost, worth, and value. You didn't know you were going to be getting an economics lesson at church this morning, did you? But cost can be defined as how much something would cost you to purchase it. How much you would have to pay in order to purchase or possess an item. That is the definition of cost. The worth of something can be defined as how much you or someone else is willing to pay for an item. They're related to one another, but really one has no bearing on the other. The cost of something can be far greater or far less than what that object is truly worth to you. The value of something is defined as the legitimate price of something, as defined by a professional in that field of area. You see, it takes someone who knows a little bit about what you're talking about in order to appraise something and give it a value that is legitimate. I could walk out there today and I could go, I don't even know of any jewelry stores in Cleveland, but I could go find one and I could walk in and I could say, this diamond over here has a value of $3 million. But I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so that doesn't make it the legitimate value of that. I could turn around and I could say, this diamond has a value of $1. But once again, I don't know anything about diamonds. I don't know anything about the cost of diamonds. The value of diamonds, to be able to put a price on it that would be fair both to the jewelry store and to the person that was going to buy that diamond. In order for a value to be established, it has to be done by someone who knows what they're talking about. Now I want to share a story with you that's going to give us some correlations and be able to put a little bit of practicality, hopefully, to what I'm going to say here. I want Sarah to put a picture up for me. You can't really see them all that well on our projector this morning, but can anybody tell what those are? Can you see them well enough at all? Flowers? They're vases. So these vases are sitting at my sister's house right now. They were given to my family some years ago, shortly after my grandmother passed away. And these vases were brought to us, and we were told that they are highly, highly valuable vases. The person that brought them to us, in fact, wasn't giving them to us, but said, I want you to keep these as a reminder of some things until certain people in my family pass away. And then that person wants them back. In case you were wondering, that's what we call an Indian giver. I don't think that was politically correct, Brother Chris. You might have to take that part out. But they only wanted us to hold them as a reminder of something. Now, why I bring this up today is because these vases have a very good way of being able to get across the picture that cost, worth, and value are very different things. Because if you were to ask me how much these vases cost me, I would tell you that they didn't cost me anything. They didn't cost my mom and dad anything, didn't cost my grandparents anything. It was a gift freely given to our family. If I was to ask you how much these vases are worth, the answer to that question will change based off each one of our opinions of these vases. You see, you may look at these and say, they're just beautiful. They're so nice. I'm willing to pay this much money for them. Then again, you may say, that's nice. I'd give you a nickel. The worth of them to you would then be a nickel. Because that's how much you are willing to pay for them. Now, the value of these vases isn't determined by you or me or even by the person that gave them to us. Because the person that gave them to us said they were very valuable. They had been passed down through his family from generation to generation to generation. These vases aren't just something that you go to Walmart and pick up, but they were art. Someone, I believe, in either West Virginia or Ohio made these vases. And no other vases are supposed to look exactly as these vases do. However, these vases are what they call a matched pair. Because they're supposed to look so similar to one another that you can't really tell the difference in them. And therefore, that increases the value of them. Now, when these were given to us, we were told that they were valued, if I remember correctly, somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000. Now, let me just go ahead and tell you, eBay does not say that they're worth that much. eBay says that the value of these vases is somewhere between $200 and $2,000. Either way, it's far more than I'm going to pay for a vase. The worth is nowhere near the value, in my opinion. But there's a difference to each and every one of these things. Now, what does this have to do with our salvation? What does this have to do with something spiritual for us today? Well, what it does is it gives us a correlative point that we can put in our finite minds to understand some things about salvation as well. I want to ask you the question, how much did salvation cost you? The day that you got saved, is there a single one of you that had to pull your checkbook out, get that credit card out of your pocket, bring a $100 bill to the altar with you, and then you were saved? That's not the way it works. Because the cost of salvation is nothing. It's a gift that is given to us. Trying to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. I have a bad habit of doing that. The value of salvation. Can anybody tell me what the value of salvation is? Thank you, Brother Nick. That was the word I was looking for. Priceless. You can't put a value on salvation, because what it gives to us is far greater than anything that we can compare it to. You see, in the housing market, the reason why we can determine the price of a house is we look at other houses that are similar to that house, we compare what they were sold for, and then we can get the value of our house. I've been watching a show with Sam about building cars. And it goes through, and this garage came together and they built a concept car that wasn't branded to any company. It wasn't a GM. It wasn't a Ford. It was none of those things. It was their own design, and nothing like it had ever been seen before. But in doing so, when they went to sell this car, they had trouble valuing it because there was nothing that they were able to compare it to get how much it's really valued at. We don't have a way in our finite minds to be able to compare salvation to anything else to get its true value. Therefore, it is, as Brother Nick said, priceless. You can't pay an amount of money that's valued at the same as salvation. That leaves one question. What is the worth of salvation? Once again, I want to spend a little bit more time on this particular question, because for each one of us, we're going to answer this question just a little bit differently, probably. We're all going to get to the same point, I believe. But the worth of something is dependent on your opinion of that thing. So the worth of salvation is a very subjective question. I want to go back to the vases for just a moment. And I told you that these vases were given to us in a time which we were hurting as a family. We had just lost my grandmother. We were trying to figure out how to move forward, what to do. And these were given to us as a gift. And the correlation, the reason why they were given to us, just to give you a little bit of a concept, I guess, context, was that there was an analogy used between these matched vases and my grandmother and grandfather being a matched pair that God put together. So it made it even a little bit more special to us. We took those as this gift, and there was a letter written with them, notes written with them that we've kept. In fact, I don't think you can see it in there, but in one of those vases are all those notes about the value of these vases, and the value in correlation to the value of my grandmother, in correlation to the value of my grandmother and grandfather's relationship to each other, and all the things that had to do with these vases. And you see, at the time that they were given to us, these vases were worth a great price to us because they meant something to us. You see, worth is not just in consideration of money, but it also takes into consideration the feelings that you have toward an object. Heirlooms are worth a whole lot more to you because you have memories attached to those things. Because grandma, great-grandma, great-great-grandma, who you may have never met, is the one that had that to begin with, and she passed it down, and now you have it. That increases the worth of something. Now, just to give you a little bit more of this story, shortly after we received these vases, the person who gave us these vases hurt our family very, very deeply. Caused a lot of pain, caused a lot of grief. And when everything happened that the hurt was caused, the first thought that came through my mind is, where's those vases? And what I wanted to do was I wanted to take those vases and I wanted to go to their house and I wanted to smash them right in front of their front door. into a million little pieces that they were completely and totally destroyed because the worth of the vases went to nothing for me. I no longer cared about them. In fact, every time I looked at them, all it did was bring me pain and hurt. Did the value change on the vases? No. The value hadn't changed. The cost associated with the vases hadn't changed. But the worth of the vases was nothing to me at that point. I didn't care about them any longer. Now, once again, what does this have to do with us here this morning? Why did we come to church this morning to hear about vases? I want to ask the same series of questions that I asked you about the vases in regards to our salvation. Has the cost changed on our salvation? It's not changed. It's still free. It's still a gift. In fact, Ephesians tells us, "For by grace ye are saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." You can say all you want that you've had to sacrifice this and you've had to sacrifice that. And I'm not trying to put anybody down. We've all sacrificed things. If you're sitting here this morning and have a relationship with God, you've sacrificed things along the way. But that wasn't the cost of salvation. Because if that was the cost, we could say, look at me. I was willing to do all this. I was willing to lay it all down. And that's what got me to this point. No, salvation is a gift from God. It's freely given to us. There is no cost associated with it. Has the value of salvation changed over time? No. How can I say that? Because we can't put a value on salvation. We've just established the fact that salvation is priceless to us. We cannot place a monetary value on it. So the value has not changed. The value is as great today as it was yesterday, as it was 100 years ago, as it ever has been, as it ever will be. The value will not change. So that brings us to the question, has the worth of salvation changed to us? Do we still believe the saving grace of Jesus is worth as much to us today as it was when we first asked Him to save us? That's a question that I legitimately want to ask you this morning, not just a hypothetical or a theoretical question. Is salvation worth as much to you today as it was the day you asked Jesus to save you? You see, it's a question that, if you think about it simply, there's an obvious answer to it. You don't have to really put too much time or effort or thought into it. Of course, salvation is worth as much to me today as it ever has been. Of course, it's great. The value, in my opinion, the worth has only increased over time. But the reality of it is that what our actions are carrying out. Those of you that were at District Convention yesterday, I made a statement in the message that I was preaching that talk is cheap. We can say that salvation is as worth as much to us now as it ever has been, but are our actions proving that point? Are we allowing our day-to-day walk, every step that we take, everything that we do, to reflect that salvation is still worth it to us? You see, I can't answer that for you. I can't tell you what you went through or what you had to go through to get to the point that you were willing to ask the Lord into your heart. But I know for me, the first time I got saved, I was only about 5 or 6 years old. And it was nothing for me. Lord, come into my heart and live in my heart. Please save me. It was in the middle of a children's church service. And I'm not diminishing that. I'm not trying to put that down. There are people that have that testimony that they got saved as a child and they lived their whole life through never turning away from the Lord. That's it. That's a fantastic testimony. That's a phenomenal testimony. But that's not my testimony. My testimony is, as I grew up, I didn't veer away from the church. I didn't stop going to church. I was told that my behind would be in a seat at church every time the doors were open. And for the most part, my behind was in a seat at church every time the doors were open. But there came a point in my life that I began to make decisions that turned me away from God. That led me down a path that said, you know what? Everything that I know, everything that I've been taught, everything that I've found in the Bible is not as important as these things of the world that I want to partake in right now. The things that I just don't feel like I can live without right now. But then in turn, that brought me back to a point that I got to what I call rock bottom. That I felt I have to be saved. I've got to get a hold of God. I cannot continue another day if I don't get a hold of God. You see it in that moment, the worth of salvation. It didn't matter if it did have a cost associated with it. It didn't matter what the cost was. I was willing to do whatever it took to be saved. Because I knew that that's what I needed to go on in life. That was the missing piece. That was the thing that continually attacked and tormented me. And I needed it just to be able to have peace. So the worth was great in that moment. But as I was studying this week and thinking about this, I'm not going to put an opinion on you. I'm not going to place any thoughts or feelings on you. I just have to confess my own faults. Because as I looked back and I really reflected and got a hold of what God was trying to do and what God was trying to say to me, is though my words have not changed and though my words are still that the worth of salvation is as great as it ever has been, the actions that I was taking did not reflect that same sentiment. Well, what do you mean, Brother Christopher? What I mean is my zeal for the Lord isn't as great as it once was. Well, Brother Christopher, that's okay. You've just gotten wisdom along the way. Listen, the Lord has given me some wisdom along the way. I still don't consider myself to be wise, but the Lord has given me help and knowledge and wisdom and instruction along the way. But that should not replace the zeal that I have for God. The fact that He saved me should keep a joy and an excitement about me through everything that I go through in this life. And the fact that I have allowed that to waver and wander has led me back to the point that the worth of salvation isn't as great as it once was in my own life. Once again, I can't put these things on you. I'm not trying to say that you aren't good enough. I'm trying to share with you my heart, my experiences, my own faults. As I was thinking about it, I began to think, well, I haven't really worked as hard as I should have to win the lost. There's been moments that I've just felt like I just don't want to do it. I want to sit down. I want to relax. I want to just sit back and rest for a while. And while I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with resting, what I am trying to say is that the actions that I have taken have said that my worth of salvation has decreased over time. Because when I got saved, there was nothing that was going to stop me from talking to somebody about what Jesus did for me. Because I wanted to share that with everybody. I wanted everybody that I came in contact with to know the same peace, the same joy, the same strength that I found when I got saved. I wanted my family. You see, and I guess that's what really got it for me, was I began to think back about the desire that I had, the longing that I had, the drive that I had to see my own family saved. And I began to look back over the years, and do I still want to see my own family saved? Absolutely, I want to see my family saved. But what am I doing about it? What actions am I taking to make that more than just words coming out of my mouth? Sure, I pray for them. But you see, I remember back to there's certain family members that I can tell you I used to call all the time. And I would beg with them and I would plead with them. Please, you know what's right. Don't live your life like this. Don't continue down this path. Don't keep going. But go back to God, please. You see, I began to think about that. And it's been years since I've had one of those conversations with them. Is that wrong? Not necessarily. I'm not telling you to leave church today and call every person in your family that's not saved and chew them out for not being saved. But what I am telling you is my actions were not proving that salvation was as valuable or worth as much to me now as it was at one time. I allowed my emotions at times to the hurt, the anger that I feel, the different things that I go through to influence my actions at times. What does that mean? It means that salvation is not worth as much to me as it once was. Those vases, they were worth a lot until hurt came along, until anger came along. And what was my response to that? They became worth nothing to me. I wanted to destroy those things and put them behind me. Church, what I want to tell you this morning, what I want to get across to you today, is the fact that we can say the right words all day long for all eternity as long as we want, but are our actions proving that salvation is just as worth it to us today as it was back when we got saved? You see, I don't think for a second that, well, let me back that up. I'm not standing here today to tell you that I have backslid. I'm not standing here to tell you that I've turned my back on God. But what I'm telling you today is that through this message, through studying for this and preparing for this, God has convicted me to say there's greater things that you could be doing, that you should be doing. But along the line, you have allowed the worth of your salvation to decrease. But you know what in turn that does? So there's a little word that's devalue. The definition of devaluing something is to reduce or underestimate the worth or importance of it. You see, when we begin to allow the worth of salvation to decrease in our lives, what that does is it devalues salvation for everybody that we come in contact with. That priceless treasure that we have that we say we can't put a value on, well, we just decrease the value of it. We've let it down. It's not as important to those that we come in contact with. It's not as valuable to those. It's not a treasure for those that we come in contact with anymore. Why? Because the worth that we have towards that object has decreased. What a loss of worth does over time is cause something to be devalued. Stand with me if you would this morning. Again, I want to ask the question to you. What is the value of salvation? See, we said at the beginning the value of something doesn't change off of mine or yours opinions. But values do change. A 1968 Chevy Malibu is valued very differently today than it was when it was rolling off the lot in 1967. Values change over time. And that's because of the worth that people place in those objects. You see, for collectors, that 1968, the value on it now is greater than it was in 1975. Why? Because it's worth more to them. It's a collectible. It's an antique. It's something that they have to work for. But on the flip side of that, does anybody remember a PlayStation 2? Walk into any video game store with a PlayStation 2 in your hand and see how much money they'll give you for it. When you leave, I can about tell you, you'll get a laugh, maybe a handshake, and if you're lucky, enough to go get you a McDouble at McDonald's. When those gaming consoles first came out, their value, their cost even, was $300. Is $300 that much money? No, it's not that much money. But their value now, truthfully, is zero. Why? Because it's not worth it to anybody. You got a PlayStation 3, a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, 17 other consoles that have exceeded the capabilities of what that could do. And the value has decreased because the worth is not there. The value of salvation cannot, let me reword that a little bit. We cannot allow the value of salvation to decrease anymore. That's not to say it won't. Because just as Brother Chris was talking about Moses in Sunday school, that we have the ability to be his good qualities or his bad qualities, his successes or his failures, we have the potential to devalue salvation. And we have the potential to increase the value of salvation. The writer of Hebrews tells us in Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, verse 3, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation? Neglect is devaluing it. not holding on to the worth of it any longer. Church, I want to ask you this morning. I've shared with you my heart. I've even shared with you my faults. Some of them, not all of them. If you know me very well, you know that's not all of them. But while I can't place the blame on you, and I'm not trying to place the blame on you, what I can do is ask the same question. Is salvation worth it to you today? Not just in the words, but in your actions. Is every step you take, everything you do, proving that salvation is just as worth it today as it was the day that you got down and asked the Lord into your heart? I know some of you well enough to know that some of you were in the same position that I was, that it didn't matter the cost. You knew you had to get saved. You knew you needed that from the Lord. Is it still worth it to you just the same way? I want us to come and find a place to pray this morning. And I want us to examine ourselves. It's not about what I think about you or what you think about me or anybody else. But I want us to examine ourselves. And if you find that the worth is not as great as it once was, I want you to ask the Lord to help us here this morning. That the worth of salvation from this day forward will never decrease again, but will increase through everything that we do in our lives. That we can make our actions prove that it's worth it to us. And we want to do everything we can to take somebody with us. Let's find a place to pray here this morning and call on the name of the Lord.